Hello and welcome. I am Miriam Boudreaux with Mireaux Management Solutions. If you're navigating ISO compliance, you are in the right place. Today, we're diving into a big question we often get asked in our consulting business. What is the process to get my company ISO or API certified? Wait, before you run from this video thinking this is going to be a boring list of to-dos, just stick with me. I promise this is just a high-level overview of the actual certification process. We have many other videos where we're teaching you how to make it all happen. But in this video, we're only going to concentrate on really just the actual steps for certification. So let's start with the basics. Who can get certified? The short answer is any organization can really get certified. Whether you're a manufacturer, a software company, a consulting firm, really, even a logistics operation, even if you are a restaurant or a dealership, you really could get certified because this standard is for anybody who wants to improve. If you provide products or services and you are committed and want to prove it, then you're eligible basically. But there's a catch. You have to pick the right standard that applies to your business. For example, ISO 9001 is for quality management system. So let's say you were a dealership and you want to get better, improve the quality of maybe your salespeople, then this will be the standard for you. If you are in manufacturing, you want to make better products, better quality products, then that standard will be for you. Now there's another standard. ISO 14001, for example, is for environmental management. In this case, if you want to improve your company's stewardship towards the environment, again, you could be a restaurant and maybe you want to be a better steward of the environment, consume less energy and so forth, then these standards will apply to you. But obviously, if you're a large manufacturing company or even provide services where you could be damaging the environment, then this standard will be suitable as well. ISO 45001 is for safety, so this is where you will be committed to safeguarding the health and wellness of your workers. API Q1 and Q2 are quality management systems specific to the oil and gas industry. And of course, there is many other standards that you can certify to. So don't just grab the fanciest sounding standards that everyone else is getting certified to. Make sure the standard fits your products and services and your business goals. If you're not sure what standard to get certified to, then watch our other introduction videos that we have for several standards where we give you a little more information so that you can make a more informed decision on what standard to certify to and which standard makes more sense for your company. All right. Let's break it down step by step, the certification process. First of all, let's discuss how you actually become ISO certified first. Both ISO and API are very similar, but let's start with the ISO standards. ISO is like training for a marathon. You need to prepare, build up before the big race. So this is going to be an overly simplified way to explain the certification process from like 10,000 feet. But it should give you a pretty good idea of the journey in case you don't know anything about it. So first comes the implementation of the management system, right? So this is where you're gonna put in place everything that the standards require. I have a sample training copy of a standard, like this is the API Q1 10th edition. So everything that is here, you will have to put it in place in your company. This is where the policies, the procedures, the forms, the processes, you name it, basically making sure that your business runs like a well-oiled machine in paper as well as in practice. Now, the implementation may take you a long time. In fact, that's what we do in our consulting business. But here, we're just showing it as a small step. Now, once you have implemented, you have to use the system for 3 to 4 months. ISO, you can get away with 3 months to use it. So it's really just like breaking in new shoes. You gotta use the system for a while. This means using your procedures that you just put in place, tracking the issues like the MOCs and the NCRs and the CIPs for the processes you just put in place, collecting records and ensuring you're actually doing what you said you're going to do, and also improving along the way. Now, the next step is to conduct an internal audit. Now, this is like a dress rehearsal, basically. Someone from your team, or it could be an outside auditor. So you can hire Mireaux, because that's another service we provide, is we conduct internal audits for companies. So anyways, this is where your team will audit yourselves to review the system, the management system you just put in place, whatever it is, safety, environmental, or quality, to catch any issues before the certification audit by the registrar. And yes, you can audit your own work, but not the parts that you personally created or the areas you personally supervise. But the standards does have some requirements of auditing your own work. Anyways, we go into more detail when we talk about the standards, or of course in our lengthy 3 or 4 day classes that we have. Now, step 3 is the management review. This is where leadership gets a report card of where the management system stands. They review the results of the internal audit that you just conducted, look at performance metrics, customer satisfaction results, feedback, risk, etc. And they decide how to improve. Actually, these 2 activities, internal audits and management review, are very important. In fact, if you do not go through them, and I was a registrar auditor coming to provide you the certification audit, I will walk away. Like, these are so important activities that if you haven't gone through it, very likely they are probably not even going to come anyway. So apart from implementation, you have to have the internal audit, you have to have the management review before the register. So now we move to step 4, which is the start of the big moment, the stage 1 audit by your chosen registrar. The registrar, who can also be called the certification body because they are the ones providing the certificate, and no, ISO does not provide the certificate. They come for the stage 1 to review your documents and of course verify that you did do the internal audit and management review, and just make sure you're ready. And if everything is good, then you get the green light to go through the stage 2 audit. And then the scheduling might begin of that audit, usually about a month apart. Now, we've done some miracles in the past and having them together when we have clients who really wanted to get certified at a certain date. But aside from that, generally about a month apart between a stage 1 and a stage 2. Now, if you are not perfect and in this stage 1 you got some non-conformities or findings, mostly they just provide you with observations actually, or any other feedback for you to take care before going to the next step. So the next step is the stage 2 audit by the registrar, of course. This is where the registrar will most likely come on site if they already didn't come on site for the stage 1 and evaluate whether you are doing what your documentation says and you have implemented the processes and you're complying with all the requirements of the standard and you have all the records to back it up. So that's pretty much the steps for the ISO certification. If you are going for ISO certification and you need help selecting registrar, be sure to watch my video on how to select registrars. Now, if everything checks out in your stage 2 audit, then certification is granted. Although there's really a process, you are recommended for certification, and then the registrar will send you your certificate at a later time, because whether you have or not findings, there's still a process. Now, if you do have non-conformities, observations, or other type of findings, they may wait for you to answer them before they recommend you for certification. And this process can take a long time if you take a long time answering. But if you are very prompt and you put the systems in place to correct whatever was issue as a finding, then the process should be expedited and you should be certified. So if you do get any feedback from stage 2 that requires attention or requires sending information back to the registrar, then you want to try to do it as soon as possible. Now, the registrar, depending on whether these non-conformities or findings are serious, they may want to come back. And in that case, this process can take even longer because they have to first wait till you answer, and then they have to review your answers, and if they are satisfied, then they might want to come back again. So make sure to do your homework before, ideally during the implementation. So that is step way back then. The better you do it, the better all the other steps will flow. Now, if you are in the oil and gas industry, you might be looking at API Q1 and Q2 certification instead. It is a similar process, but it's a little more rigorous, and it has a few more steps because, well, it's oil and gas. So let's review that process. In step 1, you need to implement your QMS. Very similar to what you did, of course, in any ISO standard. But for sure, you need to use it for at least 4 months. So here is where we start to get a little more rigorous than the ISO standards. This means your system should be running and collecting data for at least 4 months. This is, again, NCRs, corrective action, customer complaints, CIPs, MOCs, risk management, and other processes that the standard requires, including employee training, for example. Next comes the full system internal audit. So just like ISO, again, you can either do it yourself or you can outsource it. Now, this is not just a checklist. It is a full review. Every clause, every process needs to be reviewed. And again, this is another important step where if you haven't even had an internal audit, you will see later that you cannot even put your application to become API certified. Now, the next step is management review, much in the same way as ISO certification, where leadership weighs in on the results and the performance of the management system. They will look at trends, they will look at risks, they will look at improvements. So the idea is that they know exactly where the QMS is at. And just like I said before, these two are very important. Not only will you not probably be able to get certified with them, but in the case of API, what I'm saying is you cannot even probably put your application without them. So now comes the next big step, which differs a lot from ISO. For API, you need to submit an application. Now, this is not just a quote like you will do when selecting registrars and trying to find which one will be suitable for you. This is submitted an application. An API may reject your application. Yep, that's exactly right. This is where it gets really interesting because you're not going to select and choose a registrar. In fact, there is no choosing registrar because the only organization that provides API certification is the American Petroleum Institute, or API. It is the only entity that can provide such certification. So when you are ready, you have to submit key documents, including first a conformity matrix. This is where you map your procedures and everything, your processes, what you've done, to the standard API Q1 or Q2 standard clauses. Yes, API wants to see line by line what have you done to comply with each requirement. And then of course you also have to pay a hefty fee for your application, which if you go to a registrar for ISO, you probably are not going to pay anything to get a quote. But in this case, to submit your application, then it's like you are submitting your dues to become certified. And that is outside the actual audit cost. Hopefully you are doing well and you hope to do even better when you become certified. Now remember, if you haven't even had your internal audit or management review, then most unlikely you will not even be able to submit your application because these are checkboxes that you have to check when you fill out your application. But be sure to watch our video on how to speed up this process. We have some shortcuts that will get you to become API certified faster. I'm not saying it's easier, and I'm not saying you are not implementing all the requirements, but we have been doing this for a long time, and we are able to help a company who really has to get certified faster. Not necessarily it's going to be 3 months, but it might be faster than if you just go through the long process. The last step now is the API audit, where an API auditor comes on site to verify that your system, your quality management system, meets the requirements of API Q1 or API Q2, whichever you are certifying to. This usually could be 3 to 5 day audit, but it could be more, it could be less, although very unlikely that it's going to be less than 3, and especially if you are adding a monogram, then it's probably going to be more, and it could be multiple auditors as well. But that's about the time. Now, if you pass it and everything goes well, congratulations, you will receive your API certificate. But if you have any non-conformities or any findings, then the process is very similar to ISO, in which case you have to respond to the nonconformities or observations. You have to have a plan, and then the API will respond back to you if they don't like your response. The part that is a little different here, and again, very interesting, is that you may have an observation that gets upgraded to a non-conformity upon review by the API committee. So that report from the auditor who came to your site will be reviewed by 1 or 2 committees, and some non-conformities or observations or findings may be escalated. So where you thought you were great, maybe they come back and you have an actual non-conformity, if it was, let's say, an observation. And all this terminology, I know it might be so new to you because you're trying to figure it out, what is the process of certification. But let me just tell you, there is a process, and it could be lengthy if you don't do that first part of implementation well. Now, another question you might have is, well, then what is the difference of getting ISO or API certified? Maybe you skipped some of my video and you didn't hear, but obviously there is a difference aside from the management system requirements, which API is much higher. There is also the application, like I said, the fact that you have to use it 4 months instead of 3 in the case of ISO. And as mentioned before, you really, in the case of ISO, have the ability to select your registrar, to select even maybe who the auditor that is going to come to your site, while in API, pretty much you don't have a say on that, and you don't even have a say on when they are going to come, because that process is all entirely handled by them. They tell you when they have time. When you submit your application, you are really at their mercy to see when they review it, and if they come back with questions, then that process will take longer. So you wouldn't even be on your way to scheduling your audits. And again, it all goes back to having a wonderful implementation, spotless, so to speak, right? You want to do a great job to minimize the likelihood of being found during the audit. Now, hopefully I didn't scare you, because it's still a doable process, and many companies do it on their own, and some companies hire us. But let's just talk about perks. What do you really get from certification besides a shiny certificate on your lobby wall? Well, you get global recognition. You know, ISO and API are really known and respected worldwide. You may be new to this, but when you start going in this world of ISO and API standards, you realize, oh my God, there's so many standards, and all these people know this. You could go to a conference where there's hundreds of people talking about it. So yeah, it's well recognized, especially if you are in a to-consumer environment, not necessarily that you're catering to the public. For example, I cited being a restaurant and getting certified, or being a dealership. That is entirely possible, but very unlikely. Very few dealerships in the whole US and world probably have ISO certification, but it exists. And same with restaurants or even hospitals, for example. That is not necessarily where the ISO or API standards thrive, but in the manufacturing or service areas where there is consumer to consumer or other industries like aerospace, oil and gas, manufacturing, that's where this is well recognized. So becoming certified, then you're gonna be respected worldwide. The other advantage is having independent audits where it shows that it's not just you telling the world, hey, I have a great management system and great processes, but it's actually somebody else that will let everyone know that you are certified. Now, of course, when we say somebody else, you want to make sure that that somebody else is an accredited company. Like if you're going for ISO, you want to make sure that the registrar is accredited. And so that's what I mentioned before. Watch my video on how to select registrars because you want to make sure they are accredited and they are just not any random registrar out there. And of course, if it is API, then believe me, that carries a lot of weight. You go to many other countries in the world, especially even in the Middle East, and you will see all these people know who API is because they all try to achieve those standards brought up by the API specifications. Now, another perk is maybe having fewer audits by your customers because many of your own customers will accept your certification instead of them having to come to visit your facility. So if you don't have a lot of staff and you're having to receive customers and give them a tour and try to show them your management system, whether it's quality, environmental, or safety, what now if you show them your certificate? You just mail it to them when you are dealing with the prospective contract. Then they will probably accept it and they won't even need to come and visit you. Or if they come, it might be less days because they will accept that certificate. And you will see in a lot of cases, if you don't have a certification and they send you supplier questionnaire, now you have like 5 more pages to fill out, you know. But if you have a certificate, they say skip this section and go to this other section because this certificate carries a lot of weight. Now, another perk that you have if you become ISO or API certified is having a marketing edge. Just let's be honest, it looks good on the wall, it looks good on your website, and it really looks good when you talk about it. You are able to tell somebody, we are certified, our competitors are not. In fact, sometimes people call us and I immediately ask, who are your competitors? And I go find and I said, oh, your competitor is certified. Or I could say your competitor is not certified. I have even told somebody, hey, your competitor, they are in suspension. Because for API, you can go to the composite list and see who is certified and who has their certificate suspended. It is available for everyone to see. Now, another perk that you have, and this is very important, contrary to what most people will think or most really executives will think, is employee morale. It really increases employee morale. Most people think, oh, employees don't want that, they don't want change, they're not gonna follow that. That couldn't be further from the truth. Believe me, when systems are clear and people know what to do, they are happier and more productive. This is more than a perk, it's really a feeling. And people feel they are certified and they have something to go by. I'm gonna be putting out a video for CEOs where I can also stress for them how this could change their company. And yes, even though audits can be stressful, many companies come out stronger and more organized afterward. So if you're thinking that employees will actually reject it, totally wrong. Employees will embrace it. Now, let me say this, if done correctly, and if done the right way. And of course, at Mireaux, we do it the right way, where we involve the people and so forth. That's topic for another video. But the perk is that, yes, it will increase employee morale. Now, in case you're wondering then, what's the difference between certification and accreditation? Well, certification is what you get when your company proves that it meets the ISO or API standard that you are trying to certify to. So once you go through all these steps, whether it's ISO or API, then you get your shiny plaque on the wall telling the world that you are certified. Accreditation is what the certification body gets when they are recognized as a legitimate company by the accreditation body. So what I said before, if you go with any registrar who is not accredited, then this could be bad because you're just being given a certificate by who knows who they are. Think of it like this. If you're the student, the registrar is the school that gives you a diploma, and the accreditation body is the Department of Education, making sure that that school that you went to is real. So again, if someone offers you a certificate and they aren't accredited, then that should be a red flag. If all you want is a certificate on the wall, well then yes, you can do it, just go with it. Or even much easier, just go to one of those countries who give certificates like candy and then just get your certificate. But if you want to do it the right way, then you're going to have to do some work and go through these steps. So there you go. That's your roadmap to getting ISO or API certified. Whether you're just starting out or you've been in business for years but never quite understood the process, I hope this makes the path a little clearer for you. If you need some help, Mireaux Management Solutions provide consulting, auditing, training, and our software Web QMS. Maybe you want to start with training, and if you want to know whether you need to be trained or not, watch our next video on training. And if you don't know whether you want to do it solo or hire a consultant, you can watch our video. I'll put it on the description. Until next time, stay awesome, stay compliant.